Technology Spotlight: The development of Limeworks during the Pre-Pottery Neolithic. During the last glacial maximum, which peaked from about 30,000 BC to 12,000 BC, there were tremendous advancements in human technology which improved our ancestors' ability to survive those harsh conditions, including the spear-throwing atlatl and later bows and arrows, advancements in weaving and stitching, and the use of bone needles, great artworks of paint and ochre on cave walls, and the construction of seasonal trading settlements with semi-permanent dwellings in which goods and brides were exchanged between hunter-gatherer bands. When the last glacial maximum ended, hunter-gatherer bands all around the world began taking advantage of the improving climate and the general increase in available food resources. This happened in several places in the greater region, notably on the southern coasts of Arabia and the eastern coasts of the Black Sea, but another prime location was the Levant, or Eastern Mediterranean generally, and there developed a Paleolithic culture called the Natufian, which was relatively advanced compared to many other cultures at the time. They went out of their way to secure the best hunting and gathering positions in the region. The land was heavily forested, contained a number of habitable cave complexes, and was populated by many species of edible wild grasses and roots, fruit and nut trees, as well as wild game. Gazelle was a primary prey animal, as the human hunting bands would follow the seasonal movement of the herds where many gazelles would be felled by arrows and javelins. They gathered wild wheat and ground it into grain using grinding stones especially selected and shaped for the purpose. They also made mortars and pestles for grinding things, and they show the earliest known evidence of producing beer by fermenting grains. I think beer was developed accidentally during the last glacial maximum after some partially prepared grain was accidentally left to ferment for a long time. In fact, this probably happened lots of times independently, and by 12,000 BC some hunter-gatherer cultures understood the basic idea and were brewing it deliberately. Perhaps it even had shamanistic religious significance. It is unknown what, if any, government the Natufian peoples had over their social organization. Problems were likely solved by a combination of things, including large meetings which invited all local adult villagers, smaller family meetings, barter, scheming, theft, and murder, with larger skirmishes occasionally breaking out over disputes of farmland, hunting land, stone quarries, river access, etc. Disputes which were often ratcheted up by animistic religious beliefs. From a socio-political standpoint, this is what I would call a standard tribal existence. Whatever the case, in the centuries that followed, the Natufians gradually developed into the emergent polities of the pre-pottery Neolithic Levant. The pre-pottery Neolithic refers to when they possessed the beginnings of settled agriculture and herding, but did not yet produce true baked pottery as we understand it. It primarily runs from about 11,000 BC to 7,000 BC, and is subdivided into two general sections, titled A and B. A runs from about 11,000 BC to very roughly 9,000 BC, and B continues from thence until about 7,000 BC. They did not have true pottery, but like their hunter-gatherer ancestors, people's storage, cooking, and eating vessels during the A period were aceramic. They were made from a simple clay-mud mixture which was molded into the proper shape by hand and then either dried in the hot sun or else cooked hard in a fire pit. Their weapons remained similar too: arrows, spears, axes, and knives, primarily made using flint stones or obsidian which would be flaked, heat-treated, and then tied, hafted, and or glued onto a handle of wood or bone. They were now beginning to produce stone sickles as well for the purpose of cutting cereals like rye and barley. As the people gradually learned the process of domesticating crops, they adopted a more sedentary village life so as to protect their crop gardens year-round from being stolen by rival human bands and developing tribes. Similarly, the guarding of important stone quarries may have been an important consideration for settlement. Being tied to the land in such a way resulted in a large reduction in the mobility of tribes who chose such a life, but also in a larger potential population density. It was primarily the variations in the richness of the land which determined people's differing decisions about how they should best live off of it, and which naturally favored some polities over others in the long run. In other words, it favored the gradual development, through the process of conquest and confederacy, of proto-chiefdoms. Public cemeteries developed during this period. The grave of one shaman was found to contain offerings of dozens of complete tortoise shells, along with the wings of a golden eagle, the tail of an aurochs, the forearm of a wild boar, the pelvis of a leopard, and a complete human foot cut from a large man. This was the cultural background in which the new technology of limework plasters was invented. The local quarries which were treasured by these peoples included limestone deposits, stones from which people often used to make structures and carved figures, and people must have experimented with limestone all throughout the pre-Pottery Neolithic A period. By 9000 BC, they had developed a kind of mortar made from a mixture of clay, wood ash, and limestone fragments. They were able to heat the mixture to more than 1000 degrees Celsius in order to calcify the limestone into burnt lime, which could then be used as construction material. They learned to work the lime mortar as a plaster for coating the insides of houses, graves, and other buildings, making them less prone to water leaks and insects. This was a major breakthrough, as most houses at the time were round huts made from wood, reeds, and whole stones, and these huts were almost never waterproof or insect-proof. Newer, rectangular constructions were being made from mud bricks, which are bricks shaped by hand from clay, mud, and sand, and then either dried in the hot sun, burnt in a fire pit, or else baked hard inside of an earthen oven. In any case, it must have been an important communal activity. Sedentary living makes these industries possible, and the fact that these peoples were capable of calcifying limestone into lime means that they must have had kilns, which are high-temperature ovens shaped by hand from layers of clay, earth, and straw. They would shape the mixture into a basic oven shape, often with a mud brick base. Once the earth oven was complete, it could be used for cooking food, baking more mud bricks, or, if the kiln was relatively well made, it could be used to heat limestone to the point where it broke down chemically into its constituent components. This burnt lime was mixed with wood ash, manure, and water to create the workable plaster. The people used mud bricks to build the walls of their houses, cementing the bricks together with whatever materials were on hand, and then the interior walls and floor of the houses were covered in layers of lime plaster, creating a silvery white finish inside the buildings. During the pre-Pottery Neolithic B, 9000 to 7000 BC, the kiln technology spread from a core region in Lebanon, Syria, and Canaan into adjacent neighboring regions to the north, south, east, and west. And as the technology grew and spread, people found new applications for it. They experimented with the consistency of the lime plaster and produced hardened storage vessels from it, and these lime vessels are known as whiteware, after the silvery white finish. Over the generations, there was a tendency to add more and more clay and mud to the mixture, until by 7000 BC, the lime was removed from the process entirely in some locations. It is plausible that true baked clay pottery developed in this fashion. In several areas, such as Jericho, lime plaster was added to the skulls of dead ancestors in order to produce the look of a human face. This had some kind of ritual significance to the local peoples, who often buried their dead family members beneath the floors of their properties. Lime flooring was developed in some areas into thick terrazzo-style constructions, made from a thick layer of clay-infused lime plaster poured into place, and then set with a top layer of polished flat limestone pieces. Which means it's quite thinkable that the peoples in this region had the technology introduced to them by their Syrian and Levantine neighbors. The island of Cyprus, which was colonized by Levantine peoples around this time, also shows evidence of lime plaster being introduced to the island. I especially love the communal building at the archaeological site of Karahan Tepe in southwestern Turkey. With its beautiful thick layer of lime flooring, it looks almost as if it was poured into place. I really love looking at it. Parts of the floor have noticeably broken off due to age, revealing more of the brickwork going down to the site's original floor. Special thanks to the channel Ancient Architects for bringing this to my attention. And the Neolithic sites of southwestern Turkey, such as Çatalhöyük and Yumuktepe, contain limeworks as well. Yumuktepe is actually the oldest currently known site at which a kiln has been uncovered archaeologically. The relatively fast adoption of this technology across different subregions is interesting, and it has been hypothesized by some that a friendly exchange of ideas facilitated its spread from tribe to tribe. This is plausible. Also plausible is the existence of aggressive paramount chiefdoms from the area of Syria and the northern Levant during the pre-Pottery Neolithic B, not so different from the known chiefdoms of other indigenous peoples around the world, which might have been capable of deliberately exerting themselves upon neighboring cultures and peoples, subjecting them to tributes, and introducing their wondrous new technologies and customs to them, if necessary by force. At any rate, many people came to use the plaster technology, and it has become an archaeological staple of the period.